Hi, this is your Swapnil Bhartiya and welcome to TFI Let's Talk. Today we have with us Dylan Thomas, Senior Director of Product and Engineering at OpenText Cybersecurity. Dylan, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's my pleasure to host you and the company because if I am not wrong, this is the first time I'm talking to someone from OpenText Cybersecurity. So I would love to know a bit about the background of the company and then we'll talk about your background as well in cybersecurity.
OpenText has been around for over 25 years and roughly around 6 billion in revenue. So our focus area at the global level is on all aspects of information management. In particular, OpenText has really focused on growing its cybersecurity portfolio over the past several years. And our capabilities span from the application security area that I help lead, but into many other areas as well, spanning identity and access management, data security, different types of endpoint detection and response, network detection and response, SIM and many others. So it's a very wide, comprehensive portfolio that helps us be very unique in the market because of that breadth of solutions we can offer to really help our customers solve their risk and cyber resilience needs. Talking a little bit about kind of myself and kind of our background in the security space, certainly. So I've been fortunate. I started out my career as an engineer designing chips, actually, in semiconductors, but have about a little over 10 years ago pivoted into the application security space. And so I've had the privilege of being part of the Fortify business back when we were under HP, and have been part of that journey of both helping grow our application security business now through several ownerships to OpenText, but then also helping a wide range of customers and industries just adopt code security and application security as the world around us has changed and evolved, because the technology landscape today is so dramatically different from where it was 5, 10, 20 years ago. It's a fantastic and a really exciting place to be.
That actually is an interesting segue to talk about the evolution of security because you brought that point. So I'm tempted to ask from your point of view or from the perspective of OpenText cybersecurity, how have you seen the evolution of security? I'm not talking about threats in general, but I'm talking the cultural side of it because security used to be someone else's problem. It used to be an afterthought. Developers did not want to talk to security people. They don't want to look at security people because you folks would slow them down. You can even stop the release. But now things have changed. We talk about shift left movement. We talk about building the security culture. We even have jargons like DevSecOps, where things are becoming like security is becoming a board level discussion. Security is not just about compromising a little bit of data. Like it can ruin the reputation of the company, and it can also create a kind of compromise your user in a way that cannot be even repaired. So talk a bit about how you have seen the evolution of security from cultural point of view.
I would say we're on the journey, and we've come a long way, but there's still evolution that needs to happen. I think when I got started in that space, it truly was the responsibility of a security team who came in and audited developers' code, sent over a PDF report or an email that said fix these things, and with kind of first the evolution to Agile and then the transition to starting to adopt DevSecOps principles, it has led to breaking down the barriers and an increased ownership. Culturally, you see roles like security champions much more commonly placed throughout organizations these days within the engineering and development organizations. And oftentimes there's now the KPIs and metrics around remediating risks, falls to the leaders of those business units in the engineering organizations, as it should. They're the ones who have the ultimate ability to affect responsibility and updating the code. It doesn't mean we've really cracked that nut yet, though. Today, most organizations tend to, optimize, I think, for one of the stakeholders. So it could be a very developer-driven organization where the culture is strong there, and security kind of just has to go along for the ride, and a lot of compromises are made to just get things done and check a box. The flip side is you can have organizations that have more compliance pressures, and therefore security remains in the leadership role, kind of, and driving the cart. And then you have developers grumbling and grousing of, gosh, security's slowing me down still. So that legacy mindset. What's exciting over the next several years is as we continue to progress, we've got a real opportunity to further bridge that gap So we can kind of have true like DevSecOps without compromise, right? Without one group having to sacrifice their needs just to appease the other. We can truly meet the needs of both developers and security and deliver secure software.
And when we talk about some of these practices, let's just speak DevSecOps. Uh, First of all, is it more or less we talk about it, or companies are actually, because it bringing a cultural change company wide is not easy. Second thing is that, uh, I mean, we are not looking at green horde or not green horde, but we are not looking at kind of the whole unicorn developers. There are specific fields of expertise folks, security, networking, storage, whatever you say, so you cannot expect a regular developer to become a security expert, or become a security expert to become a developer. So can you talk about, when we talk about things like DevSecOps, what does it really mean for organizations to embrace these kind of practices?
Yeah. Yeah, at the macro level, it's interesting. Virtually every organization says they do DevSecOps, and that's a true statement. What the reality is, and probably a very pragmatic approach, is that not every within that organization you see a spectrum of what DevSecOps means, and it varies by individual teams, and it varies by the needs and the kind of the almost the product or the software that they're working on. Legacy applications don't necessarily have to adopt everything about DevSecOps and release every hour, because that may not be the need or intent of that platform. And you've got some teams that are really running fast and have embraced kind of, I would say, the headline principles and the poster child, what you would call DevSecOps. And so I think that's the reality that we see, and that's probably a very logical, pragmatic reality that we're in. Similarly, you focus down that next level deeper onto individual teams. By establishing a culture of security champions, you have that subject matter expert. Just like you've got your database expert on the team, right, who can be the go-to for difficult problems. You've got your front-end expert, maybe building a web app, right? They're the expert on the team that serves as the resource. Everybody's got to know a little bit about it to handle the basics, but you've got that resource and escalation point as you get to the more difficult challenges and resources. And that's an effective culture that we're seeing evolve, I think, at scale and on a repeatable fashion.
And how much of these practices do you see are already in production or being implemented, or you feel that yes, organizations know about they want to do it, but there are certain roadblocks or struggle they face in implementing these practices? So they do talk about it, but they have not fully embraced them.
I think it's probably just the challenge of change and continuity. There's so much, I would say, kind of movement and change both in the technologies that developers and organizations are using to build their software, right? Cloud native, Kubernetes, Dockerization, all these other buzzwords and shift towards APIs that continually shift the landscape and make it a moving target from a technology standpoint. Introduce challenges. Certainly AI is coming into that realm too, which I know we may talk a little about here today. But then also just personnel change. Probably one of the biggest disruptors I see of running effective application security or DevSecOps programs is just turnover. The leader of the AppSec program or the architect of their DevSecOps initiative changes hands, leaves, and things kind of they built tend to just decay. And oftentimes organizations, they get good and then they scale back maybe a few years and regress a little bit. So it kind of becomes this 2 steps forward, 1 step back mentality that organizations fight as they have that personnel turnover and the fight for kind of these security expert resources to lead security programs or lead DevSecOps programs.
Now let's talk about, since we are talking about this cultural shift that is happening, and also some of these buzzword, zero trust, DevSecOps. Another technology that we talk about a lot these days is Gen AI, which has kind of renewed our interest in artificial intelligence or AI. We have been, especially security folks, you folks have been using AI for decades. It's not a new thing. We don't have walking terminators. Maybe one day, thanks to Elon Musk, they will be there. But talk a bit about how is AI, and if Gen AI is impacting cybersecurity. Now we can look at it from 2 different lenses. One lens is security for AI workloads, and second is AI for security applications.
Yeah, there's actually a third lens I'll throw in, if you'll permit me on this. So No, so I think AI is fascinating, particularly for the space that I live in around kind of DevSecOps and application security, because I think those first two avenues you mentioned are so critical. So one of those is, how do we use AI to augment what we're doing? I love the point you made around how we've been doing AI for years. Like even within our business and kind of my experience, it's been almost 10 years since we've been using discriminative AI to solve kind of targeted problems. So the concept of using a purpose-built approach and kind of right tool for the right job for AI is not new to us, but people chase the buzzword. So as Gen AI comes in, it's really critical that organizations, and particularly like those building security solutions, are doing it in a purposeful way, that it actually adds value and it's not just slapping a chat bot on top of their solution. That's kind of the recipe, or probably the thing to be looking out for as a warning sign. That second vector you mentioned of how do we secure the use of AI is absolutely top of mind for us, and I think it's probably still emerging a bit for our end users and stakeholders we talk to in industry. Almost everyone is looking for ways who build software is looking to incorporate Gen AI in some fashion, but that introduces new threats and new risk vectors, right? Prompt injection. You can introduce cross-site scripting if you're not careful with what comes out of your Gen AI solution, right? That comes back and how you use it. Many other vulnerabilities that can be introduced into your software once you start layering Gen AI into it. So we've been very focused on understanding what that threat, and set of attack vectors look like, and how do we help organizations solve for that. The third bonus one I'll throw in is kind of an interesting one, because as Gen AI is so well suited to writing code, right? It's really has this potential to do another step function of how much software can be produced. Just like DevSecOps kind of step functions, AI coding assistants are poised that next step function. Well, if we're not really careful, we don't have a solid foundation of that DevSecOps principles and code security in place, we risk just piling on the problem and proliferating insecure software in a really, really dangerous fashion. So that's also a really interesting problem of how do you effectively leverage AI to just write general purpose code, but do it in a secure fashion as well.
Now, when we look at developer teams and when we look at security teams, as much as we talk about all these cultural shifts, these are still two different areas. Talk about what kind of things you're seeing which are happening. Is it the solutions? Is it the cultural change? Is it the processes to bring these teams together?
I think like anything, people, process, and technology, right? It's been a mantra that applies in so many instances, and it really applies here, and that hasn't changed either throughout the years, right? Certainly, we need the right technology. There's in DevSecOps, there's a lot of kind of developer-focused tooling that's been adding security capabilities that are very lightweight, and that's kind of one approach. The other one has been security tooling that's been trying to move and become more developer-centric and better satisfy stakeholders either direction. Ultimately, the tooling needs to meet the needs of both stakeholders. That's key and kind of necessary, but not sufficient. The people and cultural change will happen over time. There's things we could do at a more structural level, like teaching at universities more aggressively and making secure coding part of that, which would go a long way to some of the cultural things we've talked about. But then process-wise, one thing I'll just highlight is really how important it is to have really top-down buy-in, not just at a kind of a slideware from a CEO that says this is important, but how to operationalize that in an effective way. One of the really impactful things that I've seen through working with some large organizations is when you almost gamify the value of security in building software. And what I mean by that is you've got all these business unit heads, right, running different aspects of your business who are inherently competitive people who want to win, So one of the things that I've seen is particularly effective in driving change is when those leaders almost get pitted against each other to see who can do the best job achieving the KPIs the organization sets for their security goals, because it fosters that natural level of competition and not wanting to be last or wanting to be first, right? And so that when you have that kind of executive buy-in, that really helps a lot of the downstream pieces fall into place, because when there's friction coming from either the development or the security side, you have that air cover, right, and that ultimate goal of we're going to work this out because the people above me, not just the CEO, but the guy who's responsible, or girl, right, who's responsible for my business unit actually cares about it too. And that's been one of the most useful techniques that I've seen when it comes to scaling and maturing a program. I don't know if that's quite the question you asked or if I took you in a different direction, but hopefully interesting or useful, right?
No, that is. And now let's talk about, as much as we want to bring those cultural changes and all those things, developers or security, they also need tools. What kind of tools is at least OpenText providing to these teams? Can you talk about your solutions?
We're fortunate that we've been in this space for a long time, long before OpenText. But OpenText has really helped us continue putting fuel on the fire. So from our side view, there are several core aspects of securing the DevSecOps pipeline. You've got to bring the right tool for the right job throughout. Within our portfolio, we have ability to scan the code that you build, essentially your source code with our static analysis solutions. We have software composition analysis, which then kind of marries that with the open source that you're then bringing in to supplement your code, because that's how virtually all modern software is built, that combination of closed and open source, right? So that gives us the ability to really proactively identify risk as we're writing the software and checking it in and committing it and doing our pull requests and so forth, and have a standardized process there. And then we also supplement that on the code security side with the ability to test it once you've deployed to a QA or a lab environment. It really provides a great second viewpoint of that outside-in view, and that's typically referred to as dynamic testing. It's a great supplement. It can find vulnerabilities you don't find early with static analysis or software composition analysis, and really those three pieces together give you the full picture. And of course, we built solutions that help you tie that into your DevSecOps lifecycle and augment it with AI and do a lot of other fun things too. But at its core, most AppSec programs kind of come down to those three core building blocks, and we've been heavily invested in building best-in-breed solutions there for, almost 20 years at this point as an organization.
And if I ask you, what kind of strategies, what advice you have for organizations to not only have a better visibility, better insight into their application security posture, but also actually improve their security posture?
It goes back to, it's not just about having data. For example, I think a lot of organizations will say, I just need to pull a lot of data together and I'll get an assessment of my security posture, for example. My advice and kind of what I see working as a best practice is step one is just having a maturity assessment to know where you are as an organization on a maturity curve, right? Are you in the early stages where it's just about getting scanning integrated and building some of the hygiene around that? Or are you a little bit more mature and it's more about focused on actually working with findings and vulnerabilities and reducing the net number of risks in your security backlog, right? So if you know where you are, then you can use the data to set effective KPIs or goals for where you are in the maturity lifecycle. And as you achieve those, then you can work to then say, okay, great, now I'm ready to crawl. Now I'm ready to walk and set new sets of goals and roll those out. Then I can achieve those, go to a run or so forth, right? And that kind of a mindset and approach, which it seems so simple, is oftentimes forgotten in the race to just throw a bunch of data in a dashboard and say, hooray, I've solved, my risk posture, right?
Are you happy with the state of cybersecurity today, where you're like, yes, there is enough awareness, companies are doing the right thing, though the news cycle may disagree, and you're like, no, security is also what I believe it's not an end product, it's a process, it's a journey. Second is that I say that bad guys have to be right only once. As a good guy, you have to be right 101 time. So there is no room for error for you guys, but for them, they have to just get. So talk a bit about, are you seeing that, hey, we are moving in the positive direction, or you're like, there are some disturbing trends? I mean, just a few weeks ago, the whole social security leak, and there are big events still, CrowdStrike, they keep happening. So I just want to hear what you feel, that have we hit cybersecurity the same way we have? It is not a very good analogy or comparison. In car, when you sit in the car, you don't really worry about security. The brakes are there, everything is there. So you just sit in and drive. Or if you take any modern, well-established airlines, you don't really have to worry about that. But we can't say the same about our cybersecurity posture. So talk about the state of security.
Okay, if I give you a bit of a philosophical answer here, I'll go a little different direction. in a car, the car is not actively trying to fight against us and find ways to make us crash, nor is the air and the cloud, right, looking to make our planes crash either. I think the fundamental thing that is both fascinating but also to me highly exciting about the security space is there's an inherent incentive structure where as long as there's a financial incentive or otherwise for threat actors to compromise security and come at and look for these weaknesses and exploit them, the need for security will exist and we'll never have it solved. So that dynamic probably isn't changing anytime soon. So it's really just a question of, I think to your point of how do we continue to strive and stay one step ahead? I think it's a great kind of metaphor for the human condition of how do we continually strive to get better in what we do? Because I don't think there is ever a we've solved cybersecurity end state until that incentive structure changes, which there's no indication it ever really will. So it's really just a matter of how do we balance investment in it? How are we smart about investment? How do we adopt new technologies and work with government entities, right, to help facilitate some of those, in addition to kind of traditional commercial factors like reputational damage, right? So it all, I think it all comes together. We're always going to be here on this journey, and that's not a bad thing. Just like it's not a bad thing that for your health you always want to be exercising. I think it's something we just bake in and becomes part of natural life, and we just get better at it over time. And I think we can shift that battle, but we certainly have room to go. That's for sure.
What incentives, the bad guys had? Of course, there may be a lot of state-sponsored, nation-sponsored, attacks that are done for, national security reasons. That is a totally different market. But beyond other, when we do hear about these credit cards, social security numbers, what is the incentive? What kind of market is that? Who's making money and how they're?
You're right. There's kind of those two tracks where you have the nation state actors that have maybe a kind of more of a political goal or so forth in mind, and that's one vector. But on the commercial side, it's certainly there is still money to be made stealing identities, running up false charges, right? And that spawned a whole kind of this underground economy of specialization, and so. There's the people who have built capabilities around discovery, around gaining access, around lateral movement, around different ways of then kind of taking advantage of that access, whether it's through kind of malware and ransomware, right? Whether it's through more traditional kind of data extraction. So certainly there's a variety of ways that these cyber criminals find ways to make money. I mean, I think ransomware is probably the most newsworthy one these days, as you get companies being pressured to just directly pay money to release their data or release their data. And that's probably where you get more of the headlines, but you also just see things like cryptocurrencies, right? Has opened up a whole new vector of ways for folks when they can gain access to systems, be it at a corporate level or at a kind of individual level even, right? So it's a lot of work, but it's certainly there's still enough ways as we have digital economies to definitely find ways to monetize that level of access in personal data.
Let's not talk specifically about GenAI. We talked about AI in the previous question, but let's just talk about GenAI. How do you folks, security folks, look at GenAI? But again, from different lenses. You had a third lens last time, but from GenAI to help teams at the same time to secure GenAI workloads.
On that one of how are we using it, the most near-term value is going to be around actually helping break down that DevSecOps barrier. Because one of the things that I think the strong security tools do is they can find a lot of potential signals, right? That's one of the main differentiators between kind of just a low-end market entrant and a proven tool is that you actually have the depth to find signals. But with that comes a stratification of noise, right? And that's what overwhelms developers and what historically creates friction. GenAI, we are seeing when purposely built and carefully integrated as part of the kind of the assessment and triage process can do an amazing job, not just spotting true positives and false positives, right? Sorting through that signal, but then also applying an explanation of why that decision was made and providing remediation guidance that's very contextualized to the actual code in question. That is something that when we talk about security champions, they had to go to that expert on their team to get that level of expertise. Now we can largely automate that. And while it's not perfect, it's a step function over where we have been. So it allows us to have this really unique combination of having really in-depth analysis and not compromise there and have to turn checks off or stop looking for things that are maybe noisy, but we're able to layer on AI solutions to then make the most use of that really in-depth analysis. To me, that's one of the most exciting things that we've observed with the latest generation of these more powerful models has allowed us to do since kind of the springtime of this year.
Of course, this is August, so it's more than middle of the year. What kind of things we can expect this year from OpenText, or what you expect in the security space in general?
Oh gosh, there's so many things across the overall security space. In the application security space, I think it'll be really building on some of the momentum we've had around purposeful application of Gen AI to have better tooling and processes, and as well as a big focus on kind of bringing that security to the developer in a way that breaks down those DevSecOps barriers are two really big focuses areas for us. And then, of course, outside that, certainly building towards a number of exciting innovations in those other sister areas like detection and response and like identity and in the data space as well. So there's I think a lot coming from our way. We're very actively putting the pedal to the metal, or so to speak, when it comes to innovation and cybersecurity. So it's certainly an exciting time for us, and hopefully for our users, potential users as well.
Dylan, thank you so much for joining me today, and really great insight there from the security perspective. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did, and I hope the audience will as well. And I would love to have you back on the show to learn more about what OpenText is doing in this space, and of course to understand how the whole ecosystem is evolving. So I thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Swapno. I would love to come back anytime you'll have me.